All right, let's go. Peace and love, family. It's Tavon with the Emphatic Truth. Back for episode number 2 from this series after our recent blog article entitled The Paradox Between Mental Health and Building Wealth. Last week, we had the opportunity to talk about understanding what your role is and embracing that role as you are going throughout your 20s by seeking guidance and embracing learning. This week, we'll be discussing lesson number 2, which is distinguishing who you are within your profession versus what your actual passion is, right? So understanding and distinguishing your identity versus your profession. And I believe that's very important for us as we get into the early on part of the year, right? We're in 2024, January to be exact. So this is really the time where if you haven't already done so, you was making your New Year's resolutions, you were doing your vision boards, you were engaging in thought-provoking conversations with your friends and families because you have something to achieve this year, right? You're willing to put in the work and you understand what that looks like for you, and you have a vision for yourself. So hopefully you're encouraged by this series and you're sharing these informations and insights with someone that you know can find value in them. If you didn't tune in last week or to our latest episode entitled, again, Seek Guidance and Embrace Learning, from our first part, then I definitely want you to take some time to hit the rewind and check out that informational segment, because I believe that was important to understand how we progress through these 7 different lessons that I related to in the article. Okay, so again, last time we met, we was on lesson 1, seeking guidance and embracing learning. This one is all about distinguishing your identity from your profession. And I know it can be difficult because a lot of us oftentimes find synergies, right, between the job that we work, right, the space that we're in where we work and make our living, and then what our real passion is, right? And I remember early on when I was going to school, going to college as a college freshman, I had this great idea that, man, because I was a 3-sport letterman and I played basketball and I ran track and I played football in high school, I wanted to do sports medicine. I wanted to do kinesiology, and I didn't even know what kinesiology was at that particular time. But it interests me because I had a passion for sports and I had a passion for football and track. I thought that would also translate into my profession. So real quick, I want to tell you that story because when it became real for me, and when I said, I got to really take a look at this major, because I was not producing at the rate that I know I could, uh, and I also was not passionate. I didn't feel like it was my actual life's work. Being in that field at the time. And it became more real for me as I began to take the quizzes, the exams, etc. So what I want to make sure throughout this series and throughout these different insights from my 20s, as you discuss them with your friends or you provide feedback in the comments section, I want you to really think about what was that time for you, where you really had to take a holistic look at where you are and what you were doing, whether it be a role, whether it be a class that you were scheduled to take or you knew you had to take, or it could be a major, right? You may be a new incoming freshman, or you may have just graduated high school. You may be in the middle of your career and you're still trying to figure out, how do I relate my actual passion to what my identity is for work, right? And the way that I understood it early on was understanding motivation. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a few, but the motivation for me was listening to the Les Browns of the world, listening to the Miles Monroe, Earl Nightingale, so many others. And within that segment, I stumbled upon a segment by Miles Monroe which was entitled Becoming a Leader, How to Become a Leader. And that was very important for me because I was in a stage where I was understanding what I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. As I mentioned, I started off as a as a kinesiology and sports medicine major and ended up doing sociology, right? How did I understand that was my actual life's work, or that was my passion that I knew I could ultimately find an opportunity in? How did I get to that space? And for me, it was stumbling upon that motivational uh, lecture, if you will, where Miles Monroe was articulating the differences in leadership and the differences in understanding who you are versus what you do, right? Who you are versus what you do. And that became important for me at that period of time because as we all go throughout life, we're still trying to figure out how do we associate that passion to real money, right? How do we associate that passion to real opportunity, right? You may be that entrepreneur, you may be in graduate school, and you're still trying to figure out what is going to be that thing that continues to light that fire underneath of me. So I would encourage you to check that out. I'll link that below. How to become a successful leader, or how to become a leader, or what is a leader, by Dr. Miles Monroe. But getting into this segment here, we have some great insight from this past article. In this article, I really share the differences in what you do, meaning what they pay you to do at your job of employment, versus what you were put here to do, what the Creator put you on this earth to do. And I'm under the understanding and the belief that we were all put here to produce something, right? It's something here, uh, or something inside you, rather, that you were put here to do that no one else in this world can do, uh, because it was put in you. So it could be said about, the Michael Jacksons, or the music industry, where we hear such great talent, and you're wondering who else would have produced this if it wasn't for Michael Jackson or Prince or so many other Sam Cooke, right? I'm an old soul, so I like some of the older music. But who else would have produced this if it wasn't for these great individuals? And that's how you understand what your life's work is, right? What is that fire inside of you that can only be fulfilled by living a purpose-driven life? So one question I wanted to start off with is, let me drop down here. One question I wanted to start off with, and ask yourself, right? Ask yourself, do you leave your job feeling fulfilled? Or is there a yearning inside you at the end of the day to do something more, right? Ask yourself that, or ask a friend. Do you leave your job daily feeling fulfilled? Or is there a burning, or is there a yearning inside you to do more, right? To do more. Um, and it may be outside of your job, it may be within your job, etc. Only you can answer that. But do you feel that burning passion inside? And the reason I ask is because within this identity crisis, right, that we can get into early on in your 20s, when you're trying to figure out life, or later on in your later years in your professional career where you're trying to maintain life, it can get real. And the reason why I always lead with motivation is because for me, motivation has been that sound space for me to reset, reflect, and then execute on the next task. And if whatever your form of grounding is, whether it's meditation, whether it's reflection, motivation, writing, etc., I want you to be encouraged that you don't have to have it all figured out right now, but you have to have a plan for your life, or someone else is going to have a plan for you. And what do you mean by that? Well, a lot of times I look within our own environment, I look at, family and friends, and stories that I've heard through the years and I've seen firsthand. And a lot of the time We see how even our friends may not be in the space that they ultimately want to be in, or our family members may not be in the space that they ultimately want to be in. But it's a must for them at that point in time because that's paying the bills, right? But they really haven't figured out what their passion is versus their profession. And making this distinction is important. So I'm going to give you four key characteristics or four key points to help you identify and understand what your identity is versus your profession. Number one, separating your job from your work. Right. Number one, separating your job from your work. And the way that I explain it is your job is first of all, you have to distinguish the two. Right. A lot of time we don't have our jobs aren't our life work, right? Very few and far between. You may be a teacher and you feel like, hey, I was put here to teach. No one can do what I'm doing teaching. No one can be as impactful with these students as I can. I was put here to teach, right? And that may be your life's work, right? But for others, you may be a mechanic, but your passion is building homes, is architecture or design, or your passion is leading people through business, through entrepreneurship, right? Understanding how to get and break through that realm is very important so you don't get discouraged throughout your journey. So that's what we're going to talk about first, separating your job from your work, or separating your and distinguishing your job from your work and aligning that with your overall life goals. So what goals do you have for yourself, and how does your work and your job align with that? Right? If my life's work is to start a career in politics, for example, but my job is not getting me nowhere near or close to that space, how do I adapt? How do I shift and pivot and find new opportunities? Right? Do I need to embrace learning, as we mentioned on the first lesson that we talked about a few weeks ago? Do I need to embrace learning and seek guidance because I may need a mentor? Or do I really just need to take a step back to really understand I'm nowhere near the space that I want to be in? And I know I have a call and I know I have a purpose for my life, or I want to make sure I'm fulfilling that. And as I mentioned before, only you can do that. Only you were put here to do that. So, number two, identify the purpose versus the identity. Purpose and identity, understanding the two. And I have a note over here that says struggling to find identity can impact the purpose driven life. So, struggling to find identity can impact your purpose driven life. And what that means for me is separating who you are versus what you do enables you to really prioritize what's important for you. Really helps you prioritize what's important for you and what's in line with your life goals. So, lesson one, separating your job from your work. Insight and lesson number two that I'll share is identity and purpose. And again, who you are versus what you do enables you to reorganize and reprioritize what those life goals are. And you don't want to lose passion for those life goals. Um, Having a purpose driven life involves these critical criterias, right? As you go throughout your life and distinguish your identity from your profession, it's very important to remember those four key points that we'll be reviewing. The first two, as I mentioned already, are separating your job from your work. Number two is making sure you understand your identity versus your purpose. And that can get tricky because a lot of time our life is wrapped around our jobs, right? I hear a lot of people say all the time, oh man, I don't have anything else going on. My job is my life. And then you have the other people who are always finding themselves, even on the weekends, talking about their jobs, right? What else are you passionate about? What else can you find purpose in, right? Where else can you find value in? So understanding the identity and your purpose, and separating that from your job, what they're paying you to do, is very important to distinguish your identity from your profession. Number three is vision and goals, right? And this can get kind of tricky as well, because as you go through life, there's many distractions, and oftentimes we can see those distractions arise when we're trying to survive and meet immediate needs, right? For many of us who experienced COVID and we were sent home and we were trying to get ramped back up in 2023 to go into the office, and now in 2024 we have all these different changes, and life is just lifing, right? Life becomes just another thing that we're dealing with, and we don't get a chance to pause and stop. But staying focused on our actual vision and really uh, goal setting presents a new a new adventure for us, to make sure that even though I may have stumbled and fell off a little bit, my mind is intact with my goal, and I have base camps or check-ins or goals that I'm working towards. And I don't want to get sidetracked with with not having a clear trajectory of my life. Right. So I believe that's important. So separating your job from your work, understanding your identity and your purpose, uh, vision, and the goals that you're setting for your life. And then lastly, using your job as a tool, using your job as a tool. And what do I mean by that? Many of you may be in jobs right now where you're like, man, I'm not making enough money right now. I feel like I could be making a lot more. And I'm reminded of a time where, I've done so many different jobs, like I'm sure many of you have. But I remember this time when I was working as a flagger. I was working as a door knocker, like with clean water action, walking around, doing pretty much like cold calls, but in person, to raise money for the wetlands and the bays around Maryland, and got my uh, door slammed on me of I don't know how many different times, had the cops called on me and all these different things. But one thing that I took from that job was communication skills, right? How to be uh, assertive in your communication, how to be persuasive even in your communication, and how to get a message across clearly so you can develop trust, respect, and buy-in. And that's ultimately sometimes what we may need in our different profession. So every job is not going to be, the 90K, the 150K job. Some jobs are going to be that growth experience for you to stretch your goals, to stretch your skills rather, so you can get to your goals. And not taking those learning opportunities for granted is very important. And that's what's going to keep you in alignment with your vision and live a purpose driven life. So, again, don't be, don't be dissuaded or discouraged when you're thinking about, man, my job has nothing to do with what I want for my overall life. It has nothing to do with my life vision, because that's where that key point can come in, right? Using your job as a tool, right? And sometimes that tool is to make sure that we can live our purpose driven life. Sometimes that tool is to make sure that you can work from home to watch your kids. Sometimes that tool is to gain a new connection to expand your network for that future opportunity. So be encouraged when you're thinking about distinguishing your identity versus your profession, but begin to think about, what do I want to create for myself to live a purpose driven life? And more importantly, what do I need to include now? Right? I'm putting all the different toppings together to make this remarkable salad. But I need to make sure I'm not missing one of the things that's going to keep us all together when we uh, go chow down, which is going to be the signature, is the dressing. How does this all mesh up together? Right. I got all these different great toppings, but they never taste good alone. So how do I make sure that they're all meshed well together? They're chopped up to make sure I'm making the best presentation for myself as possible. And that's the way I think about understanding the identity my identity versus what I do in my profession. For me personally, I think my identity is wrapped around uh, being of servant leadership to others. I found a great, um, I would say, passion around helping other people see what's possible for them. For a while, I've been doing that through the blog articles at theenphatictruth.com, where you can read up on 20 plus articles that I've written throughout the years. But the other part of that is having these real life conversations with millennials and leaders, young leaders within colleges, within the business that I'm in, as well as around, on social media where I engage heavily. And we see us shifting into a time in a space where our identities are wrapped around social media. So understand this is not to be confused with distinguishing your identity on social media from your profession. This is meaning who you are, right? Your real identity, not the social facade that we see on play out on the social media platforms, but your real identity and really understanding who you are versus what you do. And if that does not align, if you don't see any path forward, if you don't see your job as a tool, if you don't see the vision and the goal for yourself, if you don't see the identity and the purpose for what you're there for, and it's not producing results, if you're not understanding the separation between your job and your work, that's where I'm here to help you out and help you understand based off of my own experiences. And just in that short time frame, being able to understand how I was able to navigate that with the help of so many other people like mentors, and just really going through those scenarios. It really helped me understand why it was important to distinguish the two and make sure that everyone else around me could do the same. So I'll ask you again, as I started this off, do you leave your job feeling fulfilled? Or is there something yearning inside of you when you leave there that, hey, I could be doing so much more if I was in my lane? So hopefully this was encouraging for you today. Hopefully you found value. And I know you found value because you shared it with a friend. You shared it with a coworker, or you even posted it online yourself. But understanding and distinguishing your identity versus your profession is really how you live a purpose-driven life, as I mentioned in the article. And we want to help you get there. So if you find value in this, please like, comment, and subscribe for our future episodes. We'll be tackling part 3 of this lesson, insights from my 20s based off of my blog article, The Paradox Between Mental Health and Building Wealth. Next week, we'll talk about lesson 3, actively engage in your life, right? Actively engage in your life. So often we get caught up on what other people are doing in their lives, and we keeping up with the Joneses, but how are we actively engaging in our life? So we'll discuss that next week. Hope to see you there. Please tune in on theenphatictruth.com, as well as check us out on our podcast. We post these episodes, so if you're in the car, if you're driving, listen to us on our podcast as well, where it's the same great content, just shared in an audio format for your viewing or listening pleasure. So you can find us on our podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. at Tell Your Truth by The Emphatic Truth. So Tell Your Truth podcast by The Emphatic Truth. You can find us there. I hope to see you next week. Share with a friend. And until then, be blessed.